is Zohaib Sheikh. I'm the head of programming for Fierce Life Sciences, and we're excited to have on the line Jeremy Trochu, Vice President and General Manager of Pharmaceutical Development Services from Catalent. How are you today, Jeremy?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be speaking with you and chatting with you today. So let's jump right into things. So what factors should be considered when planning for scale-up of your development program?
Well, actually, there's a lot of factors. This is a pretty downing endeavor. But if you want to emphasize just a few one, clearly you want to have a good sense of where your formulation is at, what equipment training scale you're considering for your next phase, depending on when you're doing that scale up. I mean, those are going to be informing a lot of decisions. So having a good sense of that, or being able to articulate, some of the needs and challenges with, the partner you'd select to help you do that scale up, that'd be critical. Similarly, I think having a good understanding of the, development history and making sure that, people that worked on the very early steps, even preclinical, anything around, excipient compatibility, material characterization. I mean, all those data points are going to help you define and design the right scale-up, program and process. So what we tend to recommend is, as much as possible, connect with the individuals that were involved, earlier in the development process. Sometimes not doable, feasible, because the molecule, the program has changed hands over the years. And if we've been able, in our case, to support that program, maybe in one of our other sites within the network, we'll make sure to bring up and involve those individuals also early as part of the discussions.
So what are potential problems that could arise during tech transfer?
Well, again, numerous ones. I think you gotta start with conversely to formulation. Often in those steps you're going to think about, do I have the right formulation? Is there, I would say, optimization work to be done, maybe some true reformulation. But in general, I think one of the main challenges is going to be around the scale up, in terms of you used to have maybe go first in human, a manual, capsule fill process, maybe 10,000 units, and now suddenly you're looking at, having 100,000, in some form of, automated, fashion. So your scale up and your planning to think about the equipment train. Again, is it a process that is robust enough to accommodate that? Is there going to be issues because you were on X equipment train and now you're going to a different one? So that is something that we see often as real hurdles. Same thing with the formulation. Is it going to again be accommodated to the new scale and the new requirements that you're looking for in that process? Also, and not to be underestimated, the methods and all the analytical work and the cleaning, method that needs to be developed. Often you're going to have, some, I call it basic and, just to get going to have a proof of concept, but now you need to have something that will ultimately need to be validated. And so requires, a little more work, and, sometimes you need to go back to the drawing board. And then the last piece, which, we're seeing more and more, if you think about the oncology products and, indications that are out there in the pipelines, higher potency, of the molecules and the programs we have to deal with. Therefore, containment requirements are also critical. And it's one thing to, handle, high potency compounds, in the GLP space, at, small quantity. And then when you get into the GMP space and making sure that you have the right strategy to contain it, sometimes that has implication on the actual equipment you're going to use, and you're going to have to do a timeout and do an engineering design step on how you're going to have the right strategy to handle those compounds. So again, just highlighting a few, but that's the fun of development. You will encounter a lot of challenges. It's about the planning and having a overarching and holistic vision of what are those different work streams that need to be put in place to have a successful scale-up.
So what steps has Catalent taken operationally to support projects as they scale up?
Well, as you know, we've been in the space for a while. So we've dealt with situations and challenges like that for many years. But frankly, I think historically we would apply, call it, good project and program management. Maybe an elegant way of coordinating brute force when you're trying to tech transfer a molecule either from the outside or, scale up a molecule or program from one early development site to one of our, commercial ready site. What we've learned, especially over the last 3 years, and we've had a more deliberate approach, is to really try to understand what are the gaps that are contributing to, again, those challenges, and what are the, opportunity to reduce, cycle time, compress those timelines, save API, de-risk, those transition from, one site to another. And so we've tasked, our teams, cross-functional from, formulation, analytical, engineering, manufacturing, EHS, procurement, to really start to harmonize, a lot of those work streams. So it can be as simple as making sure that, the excipients and the raw material you're sourcing are going to be the same from one site to another, because that's going to help a lot in your initial activities. You're going to have to harmonize your equipment trains, so making sure that you may have that particular piece of equipment for that particular capability at that clinical scale, and then it becomes, more phase appropriate to get into, phase 2, phase 3, and then ultimately can support commercial supply quantities. Same thing, in the lab. Sometimes you will have methods that are developed on UPLCs and some that are on HPLCs. Well, if you don't have the mirroring equipment between your sites, you're going to lose unnecessary time. So those are, simple, pragmatic, but that takes a lot of homework in the background to harmonize, some of the investment, but also harmonize, as I mentioned earlier, like cleaning strategies. So making sure that when you're doing your early stage development, you have an eye towards planning, well, when it's going to scale up, when it's going to go transferring to another site, what should I start planning? And therefore, having that, phase appropriate, I would say, objective and guidance up front helps also make sure that, okay, you don't forget that soon you're going to be at the next stage. And then at some point, you're also going to have to launch and supply commercially, which has other, constraints. So we've put that in place, formally over the last 2 years. And we're very pleased to, be in the process of rolling out, that offering, under the umbrella called One Express Solution, which really is about, having formalized those best practices, those processes that have been harmonized with dedicated resource, dedicated program management. And, very pleased to report that, in the last, year alone, we've done over, 12, transfers, such as a scale up between, our early development sites, and our larger, clinical sites, and now ultimately commercial. So very excited about what we can offer to our clients.
Sounds great. Are there advantages to working across a network of sites?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer that, I think I mentioned that earlier, leveraging phase appropriate expertise and skill set from, the network that we can offer, different, vendors out there is critical. The needs that a client will have for its program, earlier preclinical, to get, into the clinic is going to be very different than you got, to scale up, industrialize your process and be ready for, a clinical launch. And it does translate into how a site, in a facility is going to operate. If you can, be in that, early stage development focused, and, you're going to have more flexible, processes. You're going to be able to probably move a little faster. When you go into a commercial site, setup, well, by definition, there's going to be a little more rigidity and infrastructure that needs to be taken into consideration, because you have to meet, the right regulatory requirements and the quality standards to be able to successfully launch a product. So being able to offer best of both worlds is, I think, something that is critical. And again, based on, the success we've had, we feel that our clients and clients out there do value that phase appropriate approach, while at the same time making sure that there's seamless transition when their program moves from one side to another, with the coordinated program management and this set of harmonized processes and, investment we've made over the last couple of years.
Can you give us any examples of when and why a project would transfer from site to site?
Again, different reasons. If I can name a few, definitely, when you, phase based, so, you get into the next phase, different clinical trial to consider, that can be a trigger. for one client to think of maybe going to a different site and scaling up. Definitely, if, the quantity is required, and again, tied to your trial, but sometimes just, as part of the strategy, additional, indication, different clinical strategy, different geographical strategy, maybe a trigger. Often also, and that's more challenging, is when you have a formulation issue and you're running into, problems or, process developability issue. And you need to rethink on, okay, is that the right, side that's going to help me take it to the next level? Is that the right process and equipment train that is going to support the scale up of my program? So those are examples, that will be the trigger points. But again, you tend to see really, I don't know if there's a perfect sweet spot, but it's going to be around that phase 2, phase 2B, which, sometimes get much blurred now with a lot of accelerated pathways for development. But that's when you need to think about that, commercial launch readiness, that, robustness of your process. And this is when, again, we tend to recommend and accompany our existing clients in our early development network to consider going to, our, larger scale, commercial supply sites. Or that's when we tend to see, a lot of programs where clients say, hey, can you help me, address this challenge and help me be ready for commercial launch?
Great. Well, very great insights, and we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, Jeremy.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.